What you're telling me is that music is about to stop, and we're going to be left holding the biggest bag of odorous excrement ever assembled in the history of capitalism. 1974, 1987, 92, 97, 2000, and whatever we want to call this. It's all just the same thing over and over. We can't help ourselves.
I say when we sell. Hey, I say when we sell.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of The Last Trade, a podcast from Onramp Media. On today's show, we're joined by NVK, the founder of CoinKite, a leader in Bitcoin security and hardware devices. NVK is also a board member of OpenSats and hosts a fantastic podcast focused on Bitcoin development called Bitcoin.Review. As NVK articulates, it's often important to zoom out and recognize that Bitcoin is already winning in terms of adoption and network growth. It has steadily gained traction over the past 15 years and has attracted highly intelligent people from individuals to corporations to state actors. In this conversation, we discuss the potential mismanagement of assets in the cryptocurrency space and the turbulent nature of transitioning to a new monetary system. We also explore the role of regulations in Bitcoin's trajectory, the embrace of Bitcoin by traditional financial institutions, and the importance of custodial considerations in Bitcoin ownership. We also touch on the future of stablecoins and the potential for open source developers to build cypherpunk tools that enhance the user experience of Bitcoin. And now, time for the show.
We're live with NVK.
Hey!
I got product placement front and center for this episode. Block Clock.
Look at that.
Mini here. What is that?
Mine's on my desk.
1,
Everyone's got them as backgrounds.
1,781 blocks till the next retarget. This is the stat we have. This is a product developed by NVK.
I got a queue. Getting delivered to a random location because I got actually pressured from, this stuff matters when people keep posting about it. You're like, well, I guess I have to own one or I'm outside of the club. So
absolutely. You're not a real Bitcoiner unless you have a queue. No, just joking.
Everyone keeps them as backgrounds. I like looking at it through the day, and it's nice on the desk.
Well, I'm on camera most of the day, so I actually see it just looking at myself. I can tell.
I have 50 of them in my office. So there's no place you look that you don't see one.
Marty's on camera during the day. He is a professional influencer, and I heard something you said the other day, Rodolfo, about everybody becomes a podcaster. Or everybody in Bitcoin becomes a podcaster before it's all said and done. So. We'll all
I think it's because it's a very efficient way of getting your thoughts out. Twitter is too noisy, right? And in long form writing, realistically nobody reads. So the podcasting really is a very, very good way of getting the word out.
And I mean, you could say I'm an influencer or a first mover. We live in the digital age. You have to own your message. Content marketing is key in this world. And I was just the first one to step out and say, one of the first to step out in the Bitcoin space. I'm going to own the message.
That's right. I mean, influencer, thought leader, it's the same picture.
Are we doing bum checks today? Is that
No, moving on. I don't even engage that subject.
No, neither do I. And I'm embarrassed I brought it up. But we have a list of topics to talk about. I mean, mentioning the queue, Michael, I'm excited for you to get the queue in your hands. And for anybody listening who doesn't have context, NVK is the founder of CoinKite, which has been around for over a decade now, building hardware for Bitcoiners to secure their Bitcoin, hardware devices, hardware wallets, now NFC card, Sats card, tap signer, and the latest iteration of their Bitcoin security hardware is the COLDCARD Q, which is a form factor that looks somewhat like a BlackBerry, a calculator, whatever you want to refer to it. And I've been using it for months now. And just want to say, in terms of hardware, I don't want to disclaimer, 1031's an investor in CoinKite. CoinKite's a sponsor of Rabbit Hole Recap, another podcast that I host. But honestly, the battery pack and being able to pass around transactions and sign transactions using NFC and a QR scanner is one of the best UX upgrades I've had in terms of Bitcoin hardware. Just literally not having to plug it in anything, having a battery pack, and being able to scan a QR code with Sparrow Wallet to pass back PSBTs to sign and then broadcast. It's an incredible experience.
It's like, I mean, we do this because we want to, not because we need to. Like we make the devices for ourselves. So, it's a product from Bitcoiners to Bitcoiners. Like, it's not like focus group on shitcoiners and let's like open the funnel as big as possible. It's very concerted effort into making a product that works for us. If it works for us, it's going to work for other Bitcoiners. So it's very focused that way.
Yeah, it works for me.
At Onramp, we believe that Bitcoin will be the most important asset to own in the 21st century. Our multi-institution custody solution is the safest and most secure way to ensure that your Bitcoin remains in your and your family's possession for decades to come. Multi-institution custody maximizes security and minimizes counterparty risk, leveraging Bitcoin's native properties to eliminate single points of failure that have historically complicated Bitcoin ownership. Onramp provides peace of mind for your Bitcoin journey. For more information, check us out at onrampbitcoin.com.
I want to throw a spicy take out. I hesitated. I'm just going to do it. I'm curious, NVK, how much the Q was influenced or accelerated because of Foundation's hardware device. And why I bring it up is because I haven't played with the Q, but I got it because I was nicely sent a Foundation device, and I liked the form factor and this idea of like not V1, but the hardware device that had dongles and all the things associated is just like clunky and messy. Building on chain, you're getting old people on a call. You got to like plug in, the USB-C. It doesn't match to the drivers and all that. So that form factor of like QRs, tap signing, or NFC was really awesome. And then to see you guys do it, like how much was the market? I guess where I'm going at is, was it a part of that helped drive it? And because I personally think it was, but I'd be curious. And I think it's a good thing from the industry perspective because we're all like working towards a certain goal and that angle of like iron sharpening iron.
Yeah. So like, I don't think it was them. I think it was Spectre DIY, mostly that had the biggest effect on that. We've been building the device for many years. We just sort of like never felt the market was ready for it. I think because realistically speaking, like that company doesn't have any market share, right? It's like there's a few devices only out there, so there wasn't enough user demand that came from that with the experience using that device to influence the market demand for it. I think the biggest demand from users came once Jade from Blockstream and Seed Signer both had a lot more market share, and probably tens, hundreds more market share than that device. So those two devices are sort of like cheaper, less secure kind of thing, but they had very, very interesting UX paths they took. That helped create some demand, or at least rhetoric, around having QRs. And I think the main thing that made the QR come to fruition was the fact that on that year that we decided to launch the Q, the supplier for the QR scanner found some economies of scale that were further advanced and lowered the price a lot of the scanner. So we could economically create a product like that. The idea of the Q has been something on our bench for many years. The QR per se, I don't like it. I feel like most people don't use it. It is a nice thing to have for you to check addresses, but realistically speaking, most people want NFC or USB. The problem is Unchained never created an app with NFC. Unchained is a small market in terms of like user count. It's a much more higher net worth folks that are interested in that sort of set of trade-offs. It's a shame they never added an NFC because it would have made the device a lot cheaper. But anyways, the point is, I think the market has evolved with more options. Another device that actually had very good UX, NFC, and QR, but again, lower security threshold is Cobo Vault. I think now it's called Keystone. They also had like good UX and camera, but it was sort of like all over the place. Not enough people using. 90%, 80% of the market still is Trezor Ledger, which neither have QR code scanners. And there's still USB use by Trezor with Unchained as well. So we're trying to find ways to move people out of USB, if that be via QR, if that be via NFC or SD card. As long as people get out of USB, I think we're in a better place.
Yeah, I'm going to stand up for QR here. I like the QR experience. Mainly because you can interact with your laptop, where most laptops aren't NFC enabled yet.
Yeah, and part of bringing that up is just internally, like we have a lot of individuals that want to mix between thinking through what does it look like from our product and multi-institution to be able to participate, whether it's holding 2 keys or 1 keys. But there's this also dynamic of like when we joke around plastic device of a little Trezor 1 in somebody who's holding $10 million. And as that appreciates, you just naturally are like holding this device and wondering like, is this thing going to last very long? And so that was part of looking at Foundation, and the Q is like, what does it look like from our product mix as we grow? But then the other side of it, and I've shared with Marty, and I'm sure you guys have chatted about, Rodolfo, about and this is an interesting topic to get your take on it. You've been probably the loudest about video verification being doomed from just like authentication. Independent.
It's the end of it.
Yeah. And so I'd love to hear those thoughts. But the thing I keep anchoring back to is like the idea of like, obviously having a private key on one of these devices and being able to authenticate in some way, whether it's, leveraging movement of Bitcoin across the protocol or other things that I see these devices playing different roles in authentication outside of just participating in a quorum for your asset. But curious on the video verification, because I don't think a lot of people have heard this take, and it's very valid and something we're thinking about deeply. We'd rather get into it early versus a lot of existing companies. This is all they rely on. And now they're just like almost going to be trapped for the next decade or at least next couple of years.
There's a service provider I use for some legacy interfacing that I have to do on the institutional side. That so at some thresholds they require video, which I simply not willing to do because there's going to be fake videos of me because AI can do that now. And also, I don't want an image of me on video talking about a specific Bitcoin number because that just sounds completely retarded. Because reality is all companies will get hacked. It's a when, not an if, right? So Unchained will get hacked and will leak those videos eventually. So it's better not to have those videos. So then the answer is like, how do we authenticate people, right? And voice is gone, video is gone. So the way to do it is with private key pairs, right? Why don't we use a tap signer, right? Maybe it's not for signing a transaction, but it's still a Bitcoin curve, and you can preset the device, send to your customer, or the customer has to come pick up in person when they set up the account, right? So you have a nice, solid chain of custody, and they use that to authenticate into the app on top of the signature they provide with their hardware device, right? I think that puts people in a much better place. I don't think, like biometrics, which is video or voice, is not something it's something you have. And something you have can be taken from you.
Yeah. If you've seen, and just like talking about it all on air, because it's better to have it out and then everybody do it or compete to do it, is we have Onramp Branches and we have a team all over the US. And the idea is as we grow, you have a certain balance, you come meet a representative at the local branch and you can authenticate this is me before starting the transaction.
No, that's nothing beats in person, right? So for example, it's funny, but there's a few business service providers of legacy services that I deal with, right? Like that are like either Bitcoin bridges or they are banking partners, right? And one of our corporate requirement is that all the KYC be done on paper, right? Like I understand they have no choice; they have to do KYC. They need a picture of my penis, but let's do that. over paper, right? So what we do is we FedEx a photocopy of any document that they need, and if they need to see it in person, we either fly them in or we fly out, right? They check the photocopy versus the original, and they're good to go. Like legally, we've checked, and like most jurisdictions are perfectly fine with that, right? How that scale for like a smaller, more retail kind of customer, I don't know, but for institutional investors or institutional clients, it definitely scales, right? So, I know that you have a safe somewhere in your office that has my identity in a photocopy, which is fine. And, remote attackers can't get that, right? Worst case that happens is that burns or whatever, and we do it again. But I think that's a much more sane path forward.
I think how that scales is you've got companies that, if that becomes the standard, you've got companies that focus on that and only that. And, you outsource identity verification and KYC, just like, many firms do already today, to companies that might do that best.
And I think a lot of people would think this is overkill. They would think this is overkill, but anybody that's listened to the Junsith deal or should go listen, or Marty had a great, post right after that. It's like, this stuff's happening. You have never seen a digital bearer asset live natively on the internet. Like, they are coming for everything you have.
Well, I mean, even like shopping carts, like Trezor lost all customer information once. Ledger lost it more than once. I don't know. I lost track of that. Yeah. CoinSquare, an exchange in Canada, lost all their customer data as well.
Binance. There was pictures of people doing.
And you can't just outsource this to a third party that's going to lose the identity, right? It's even worse if you outsource to a third party that scams people's faces and whatever. That's how a lot of exchanges do it, because they will lose it, right? Like somebody that has it on a server will lose that identity information, and it's very scary in Bitcoin, right? Because now somebody can go and scam people out of their coins or go kidnap them, right? So I think it's very important that I think we can already make the legal case, as long as some company ends up taking this to the courts to prove that, online identity KYC requirements are actually detrimental to the citizens, right? Like you're causing actual harm. That then people can sue, right? Their service providers. I get kidnapped. I'm going to sue you for damages now because you lost my identity and my home address. I think we're going to get to a point. It's early, right? I mean, banks used to just photocopy your stuff. They still do. You go to a branch, they photocopy your stuff and they put it in a file, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking my language now. We need to abolish the Bank Secrecy Act, which all of this KYC AML nonsense stems from. And the data's out there. The goal of these KYC AML compliance regulations is to prevent money laundering and identity theft. And the stat is that it's in terms of money laundering over the first 50 years of the BSA proliferating and these compliance regulations getting more and more insane, they've only stopped 0.1% of global money laundering flows. And then you get down to the question, right? Like, what is money laundering? Like, does that even exist? Is that even a good term?
Well, I mean, remember, the bad guys by the law use HSBC. They don't use Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right, when they want to money launder, right? Like the cartels require the HSBC has bigger windows for bigger bags of cash. It's not a joke. Like,
this is a briefcases, right? There's dimensions that are required.
Yes, they ask HSBC to have bigger windows, and they put bigger windows for more cash. Like,
yeah, they said, okay, we'll do that. Just make sure the briefcase has to be 30 inches by 18 inches, and you can push it through.
Is it JP Morgan that does the money laundering for what's his name?
Jeffrey Epstein.
The guy with the island. There you go.
Deutsche Bank.
Speaking of a little money laundering, was it Solana ETF was approved yesterday, or the Doge?
There you go.
Or no, it was ETH. It was ETH. It was the ETH ETF.
I mean, like, what is the biggest tax scam? Is like the people go and they buy a NFT from themselves for a lot of money, and then they sell it at a loss, and then they harvest that loss, right? It's like,
I mean, it's been happening in the art world
with people's pictures. I mean, come on, you know.
Yeah.
Anyways,
we're getting off kilter here a little bit, but what I want to bring it back to is something we discussed briefly pre-recording, and it actually ties to what we're just talking about, these KYC, AML regulations and the ambiguity of what a money service business is these days. What are your thoughts on everything that's happening in terms of the Western regulators coming after open source developers and the reaction to the actions of the government over the past 2 months? Are we winning?
Yes. I mean, and people are losing their fucking panties for no reason. I mean, like, you know, like, yes, that we have an overbearing, like, legal system that, like, mostly goes after, you know, the wrong things. Sure. You know, like, we can argue about all that stuff all day, right? But realistically speaking, I mean, there is no law in the books that says you can't have your own Bitcoin on a hardware wallet, right? What they're after is not your Bitcoin on your hardware wallet. Is they're after is people like evading taxes, right? So they want to make sure that, you know, when people buy and sell Bitcoin and all that stuff, they're capturing some of that. Is that wrong? Absolutely. But let's not confuse that overburdening and overbearing taxation regulation and the side effects of that with the state saying you can't have Bitcoin, which is not true.
Yeah. I mean, it's very important because there's no shortage of like recent things that come out, and people generally like to isolate and talk about, like, the one was the qualified custody, but in the trust, but there's in the trust charter. And then the most recent one, it was money transmission. It's like these things we look at in like microcosms of Bitcoin or digital assets. Like, this impacts everything else downstream. Like, this is the smallest industry. Yeah, it has nothing to do with it. I mean, it maybe has. I would make the case. I don't know how much it has to do with Bitcoin, but it's this idea of it disrupts so many other people.
I think they're certainly most threatened by Bitcoin because.
Do you know that meme with that ad guy on the elevator? With the madman guy on the elevator, and the other guy says something. He turns to him, says, "I don't think about you."
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Regulators don't think about Bitcoin. Like, they don't think, like, you know, from time to time, a crypto, between quotes, right, like, comes up, like a bill or something related to us comes up in their desk, right? But like 99% of the time, we don't exist to them. They're preoccupied with, like, you know, let's bomb someplace. You know, let's like, you know, like, go after landers and like other shit.
Well, and what actually supports that is this past week, because everybody thought there was like one side and trying to stifle innovation, and then like Trump says crypto, and then they're like, like, let it all go through, whatever, we don't care. ETF, ETH, go. It's taken, how long has it been? 10+ years for the Bitcoin ETF.
But like, another thing that people don't notice with all the KYC shit show and a lot of this like tax sort of like this tax recovery efforts is that like this is international, right? So the OECD changed a bunch of rules, and whatever the name of the other group organization that handles taxes internationally too. What they're trying to do internationally, pretty much since 2014, is like they're trying to find loopholes that like average people, like dentists and lawyers, can use to shelter income, and they've been going after that. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin, and they've been changing it so that, you know, only Halliburton can do it. You know, but like dentists and lawyers were sheltering the Caymans, you know, pre-2014 successfully. So they're trying to remove those loopholes. Right. And that has a lot of consequences to KYC, BSA, and other shit locally as well.
At the same time, there's $34 trillion in debt with $220 trillion in unfunded liabilities.
What's another trillion, Marty? Like, these numbers don't even like represent things anymore in real life.
No, if you made $1 million a day, going all the way back to when Jesus Christ was born, you would not have made as much money as the U.S. government has printed this year. Not even a very small fraction of it. It's insane.
But how much does this money buy?
Not a lot. Not less and less every day. The sats per dollar number go down is very aggressive right now.
We're winning.
Moscow time is getting smaller on the block clock.
I was thinking about, like, I didn't run the numbers, but I was thinking directionally, if you just move dollars to Bitcoin over the past few years and you look at inflation and what you could have compounded if the money wasn't losing purchasing power, if you had dollars and were just investing or building, you're almost just staying even. You're not actually like really winning. You know, like that's how messed up, like how bad people are from businesses and like people going backwards on holding dollars is like just by moving into Bitcoin, I think you're basically keeping keel with how things were supposed to be.
I don't know, man. If you bought like a few cycles, even DCAing, you're pretty much ahead.
Well, I think, yeah, that breaks down, I think, at a certain point, like call it, I don't know, maybe, I think it's like Epoch 3 post, like the 17 after 1,000, where I think that might, but then you have to take into, like, if the money wasn't losing value, you would have been making money with it somewhere else.
Yeah, but he was, right?
But that's what I'm saying. So, like, what would that money, like, there's still, you would have had a net gain. If the dollars were just static, you would have still increased those dollar amounts independent of Bitcoin if it wasn't inflating the supply. So that's,
can you really can you make more than 7% a year? Realistically speaking, no. I mean, unless you're super risky.
Well, if you build businesses that are productive and you like do things in the world, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
that's what I'm referring.
But that's the company's the risk, right?
Yeah. It's just an interesting, I was just like basically thinking about like businesses and treasury management. And it's like, you have to, if you want to live or you're just going to die, is have your position in Bitcoin. And was like looking at it, it's like, you just have to play the game or you're not going to make it.
I mean, you really have two choices, right? You either have a PhD in finance so you can beat the market, or you buy Bitcoin. Like there's no middle ground. Like how is an average person out there going to like, you know, beat S&P? Like, you know?
The PhD in finance to structure the Solana or ETH ETF, because I don't think you go further out in the risk curve because you're not even you can't even beat it by traditional, like 7 to 9% is not beating it. You might be like losing 2 real percent year over year at 7% or 9.
Exactly. It's pretty brutal out there, man. And DCA is a terrible strategy too. I mean, like nobody should DCA. Like, you know, you should lump buy it. But anyways, that's a different.
But not
most people don't have the luxury. Most people don't have the luxury. NVK. Okay. Some people.
No, I mean they can earn and then wait a little and then buy. Like they don't have to buy as they earn.
Yeah, but again, fiat, high time preference mindset. I think most people are like, I need to stash this away in Bitcoin now. I'm going to spend it.
It's better to DCA than to not buy Bitcoin. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess in the broader context of things, let's make the case for Bitcoin is winning. And despite what many in the industry who are hyper-focused on everything that's been going on from a regulatory perspective may think is an attack on Bitcoin, but you're putting forth that like these people really don't care. Things come, things go. How do you think why do you think Bitcoin is winning right now? Because I always say we're going to win, and you hop in my mentions, whether it's on Nostr or on Twitter, you say, Marty, we're already winning. Why are we winning?
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, like, okay, like this started as like literally a magical internet money joke. Like, you know, like it's like, it's so hard to convey to people what Bitcoin in the very early days looked like. You know, it's like you could either buy shit on Silk Road or like, spend 40,000 Bitcoin, buy some pizza. Or, you know, like the idea, like the original Moon meme was $1,000 Bitcoin. Okay. So we're in Venus now, right? So, I mean, Bitcoin is over $60,000, right? And steadily, programmatically, like making its adoption wave cycle increments for the last 15 years, right? 15 years is a very decent track record. We managed to have a legacy finance interface added which is the ETF. They were not able to prevent that. Majority of Bitcoin is in the hands of individuals, not institutions. And that's the great majority of Bitcoin is out there. We have state actors accumulating coins. We have state actors fighting each other on how they see Bitcoin be, which is perfect, right? We need flag theory for Bitcoin. We have the software being upgraded and updated and guarded. We have no single source of truth in Bitcoin. So that means that, if somebody says, oh, we need to go this way with the Bitcoin code, it doesn't. It's always contentious. The more contentious it is, the more we're winning. That means nobody can ram it through. We have the biggest computation capacity on Earth by probably 1,000, 100x anything else. That includes every supercomputer, every single state actor owns all combined together. We have this incredibly asymmetric defense mechanism where, an individual with $100 device can protect itself and its economic value more than a $1 trillion bank can protect it for them. The Bitcoin supply has not changed its schedule since its inception. We attract a lot of smart people. The low time preference still rules Bitcoin. It's just it's not every property of Bitcoin is working. I don't understand why people freaking out. It's weird.
At the same time, too, I think this was probably the most encouraging bullish week that I've seen since I've been following the industry since 2017. And watching, I've been on the pod a few times here calling out I haven't understood the political calculus of the Biden administration attacking Bitcoin, attacking the industry, just because it hasn't made sense from.
No, it does. It's Bitcoin white. Bitcoin is white supremacy. It's like what is it? No, it's a white privilege to hold Bitcoin now, right? It's just for the masses. It doesn't make much sense, but it sells.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you've got 27% of Americans holding crypto. Are you gaining votes by attacking crypto broadly, or are you losing them by attacking? And the answer is you're losing them because the people outside don't care. And with the SAB 121 vote that happened last week, seeing Democrats come across the aisle and say, "Hey, there's a bipartisan majority here that is supporting the issue." I think it was 2 weeks ago the Biden administration came out saying they were going to go veto this bill. They started feeling the heat. They started feeling the heat on Trump coming out, and we're watching the game theory play out a lot faster than I thought it would. The national level, the presidential level, and you're seeing crypto become a truly presidential debate stage issue. And you've got the Biden administration now backtracking, approving an ETF, over the course of 3 days. All of a sudden, it's not a security after 2 years of attacking it. But they now realize they had the incentive over, until November to go up any way that they can to not lose these votes, because they feel threatened in the 5 states that matter in a presidential election that they're going to lose voters as a result of what they're doing here. And this is the game theory. This is what we go on these pods, every week talking about the incentive structure of Bitcoin. This is it playing out. They're fighting for our votes and trying to do their best to increase the number right now so that, they can make people forget what happened the last 2 years.
Is that true? I'm curious. It sounds good in my opinion. Mitch has been pinging me about this all week that it's insanely bullish. So we had him on to talk about this exact comment and others. But I don't know. It feels too obvious or too simple in that format.
Yeah, I am on the Mallar's camp on this. Reality is the banks don't want to buy more shitty paper that doesn't pay them. So, they want to cut, like, it's the same shit that happened in 2016 with the ICOs, that all the VC large funds wanted a cut of the crypto market, right? So A16Z caused that pump, right? With all the ICO insanity. So now I don't think it's about votes. It's about like the scammers have way more money to lobby than Bitcoin does, right? When they were attacking Bitcoin, nobody was with that effect against politicians. But now that the scammers are behind crypto and have to fight the politicians, that battle is going to get fought and won, right? Because the scammers are much closer to the money printer in the quintillionaire effect than we are, right? So they will go knock on the door of their representatives saying, hey, do you still want to get that cash that Sam is not going to give it to you anymore because he's in jail for your next election? And they're like, yeah, I'll take it. And they're, it's the playbook of Wall Street, right? Like, I mean, there really is no difference on that.
But there is the path that it helps us, and I agree.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like,
you're saying the same thing.
We're saying the same thing because they
just don't care about Bitcoin. They're just to care about dollars.
Exactly. But what I don't think enough people in this industry realize how much of a detriment SAB 121 is for I'd say, we as the plebs and the people still have access to cheap Bitcoin here. But at the same time, your corporate treasuries, they've got to get comfortable with Coinbase's the BitGos of the world in single party custody, with institutions that are crypto native, to be custodying their treasuries here, because the Bank of New York Mellons and State Streets, they don't have the opportunity to step into the space because of SAB 121, and it's just it hasn't been worth it for them. And you've got all these backwards incentive structures of how large companies would have to hold their Bitcoin and trust single party custodians, try to figure out ways that they can be covered on insurance or balance sheet recovery in case of loss. And it's not the way this industry scales. And if we want to get the corporates involved the way that adoption is going to take place, you've got to let these companies with larger balance sheets step in that they're comfortable with. And yes, they're absolutely going to make money off of us. That's what the ETF is. That's why you're going to have.
But this is the thing.
Yeah,
I've been harping on this for a while, right? Like, I find this anti-ETF thing that Bitcoiners do extremely childish and sort of like very like almost ignorant in a way. Like, the reality is, like, we have to get economically big and fast, and if we don't, to get killed.
Yes.
Okay. And it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be on our terms. It's not going to be nice. Reality is, like, monetary systems or assets or whatever you want to call it, if they don't get big, they get killed. And if the ETF is how, like, a lot of this entities coming to Bitcoin, we suck that value in and we become more powerful, then so be it, right? Like, we're going to need 50 things like that. What did people think was going to happen when Bitcoin gets big? Like, like a big teacher's pension fund is going to have a cold card in the office? No, right? Like, that's not how, like, all these legacy systems work. Like, these things that need to happen in a way that's palatable to them. Is it great for them? No, because they have shitty paper Bitcoin. But it's better than no Bitcoin exposure at all, right? And do this force a centralized Bitcoin a bit? Yes. Is that great? No. But it's also better than Bitcoin getting killed because it didn't value fast enough.
And I totally agree. And what I see here, look, I don't think anyone here is going out to go buy the Ethereum ETF, or like but what I see going on is we're getting wins for the industry, broader crypto. What does that do for Bitcoin? That provides us insulation. And when the industry gets attacked, it's going to be on the outer stuff that, or like the edge cases that are getting approved here, whether it's Solana ETFs or whatever it is, we're providing layers of insulation that we're going to become more untouchable, because assets are going to grow. Assets are going to grow for the industry. It's going to be more meaningful businesses to the BlackRocks of the world, to the teachers funds out there and the pension funds. And we're growing fast, just like you just said. It's not bulletproof, but it's the more we become part of the stories for these companies, the revenue models, the harder it is going to be to break it.
Well, this ties into what NVK said. Is like, we are winning in the sense of NVK's lived through these cycles, and I remember previous cycles building other businesses of like everything they eat themselves. Like, Solana ETF will effectively eat itself, and then everybody's sitting there, and the people that were doing it the right way exist, and then you just take larger market share. So you just have to stay around long enough, which is part of the other thing.
And this gets to something that Michael, you and I talk a lot about behind the scenes, and bringing this back to SAB 121, particularly the problem with SAB 121 is that the regulators were expecting banks, if they were to custody crypto, to hold the same amount of dollars. They had to basically have the same amount of dollars as crypto. And like one company that did this that went under. I mean, this is not why they went under. They basically folded. Decided to shut their doors under their own volition with Silvergate. I mean, they had to do this, and it's just completely insane when you consider the fact that these banks are zero reserve banks at this point. They don't even do it for their dollar assets. But now that SAB 121 has been passed, and it seems like they're going to allow these institutions to hold Bitcoin on behalf of their customers, that then begs the question is, do we think that they will recognize that this asset is wholly different, and will they turn into just like BlockFis on a much bigger scale, where they're like, oh, we can just lend this out, get yield, give it back to the customers, and have ruggings on the scale of which we have not seen maybe since Mt. Gox in terms of Bitcoin lost on the balance sheet. So like, I think that's the big question. Like, everybody's happy at the institutional level that this bill has been passed, but I think that's the big question. Do these institutions recognize what they're working with, and how bad are they going to mismanage this asset, if at all?
I mean, Silvergate was scammed, but let's not even go there. Like the government didn't like them, so they made sure that they don't exist anymore, right? I mean, that's the truth about Silvergate. But going back to this, the more freedom we have, and the further we have this freedom options, the more freedom to scammers are going to have too, right? And to steel man some of the Bitcoiners' argument against the ETF is like, you're going to have the scam coin ETF, and then they're going to make us look bad. Yes, but if you have the low time preference mindset, we're going to have the next 80% crash. We're going to get Bitcoin gets to $1 million. Every pension fund buys it, and then it crashes 80%, and then there's going to be, screaming on TV that crypto is evil and it could cause problems, and look what happened, and people are going to say that you have to make the laws, that the price can't go down by law or whatever, or it's going to be too big for them to take away from us anyways. It's going to be very messy. It's going to be very, very messy. Like, you don't just replace a monetary system, in any pretty way. Like, look at like gold had 5,000 years, right? And like, look at the amount of like killing, fighting, and like stealing and faking it, and that happened through this time, right? And then look at the amount of shit, how many places they bombed and raped when they ended the gold standard. Look at the 70s and 80s, what countries, first world countries, did to other countries that had gold, right? So it's like, this is just a path, right? It's not like for the people that want to be aware while the thing happens, you have to be mindful that, you know, shit's gonna be messy, and if you don't want to if you don't want to accept that, then close your eyes, stack your sats, and go do something else and don't pay attention. But like you screaming on Twitter that the scammers are gonna have ETF and that's bad, it's not gonna change the fact that the scammers are gonna have an ETF.
Whether you're a seasoned Bitcoiner or brand new to the asset class, Onramp provides a best-in-class private client experience to ensure that your Bitcoin remains accessible, secure, and in your control. You'll have a dedicated advisor to guide you every step of the way. If you want to meet in person, we now have Onramp branches in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Nashville, Dallas, Austin, Houston, Los Angeles, and Denver, with more on the way. Check out onrampbitcoin.com/branches to learn more and get connected with our team.
It's important, like the messy dynamic is what I think people are afraid of, not knowing order. It's a proxy for volatility, right? Like fiat's dampened volatility, but volatility always exists. And so then when it doesn't fit in the box because certain, you know, rules around privacy and, you know, the idea of money laundering, and it gets mixed up with, you know, the KYC and what, you know, Samurai was going through, or other firms, or people leaving, when you can make the case certain people were probably either going out of business or leaving either way for this, and it could have been an excuse. Like all these things happen and they get lumped into certain reasons, versus this stuff's going to be naturally messy. To your NVK's point, like there's a lot changing in the world outside of Bitcoin, and so it all starts to look a little uncomfortable, but you have to just recognize that. And we've lived in a world that there hasn't been a lot of volatility historically outside, you know, the past 4 years have been a little crazier or more volatile. But this is just how it's going to move for the next decade, and you have to be prepared, and you have to plan accordingly and have redundancies and all the things that are involved to like actually make it and not be in jail and play by the rules. There's something you said with Peter, which is like, you have to have good accountants and you have to have good lawyers if you're gonna, you know, want to operate, because you have to have people to make sure that you're playing by the rules.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, like you can't change the world from jail, right? Like, really, like, you know, like, and you want to have a life, and you know, you have to exist, and there is no freedom in any country, right? Like, you know, some countries, you know, let you have the freedom of shooting somebody entering your house. Some countries let you like have less KYC requirements, but at the end, every country that we have in the world right now is communism, right? Like, so like you have to play within the environment you're in to have a reasonably fulfilling life, right? And sort of like hopefully build as fast as you can, like power and ammunition, so that you can like fight your way through a better world, right? Like it's not like the person screaming in front of a government office that changes the world, right?
I want to like first talking about those builders, like the win this week. I think about it was cathartic, because at BitGo, my job was working with all the builders in the industry, or as many as we could. It was hundreds of people that I saw affected by Silvergate and Signature going down, you know, as a result of the government largely fighting us, to, you know, all the Wells notices that were served, and all of that compounding over and over again every single month to, you know, I think the SEC case, you know, losing against Grayscale was the first chink in the armor, but this felt like that. It was cathartic that, like, for once we weren't being fought against, and we were actually being embraced the way that, you know, we're voters in this country, and, you know, our vote should be fought over. And it realizing how much it helps all those builders out there. Yeah, Marty, I think you're totally right. I think the amount of bullshit that we're about to see from the traditional finance system, where they're going to be lending, you know, the Bitcoin that's sitting in custody, that's absolutely coming. Michael, you're right. This is just like, that cat's going to be out of the bag. This is the world we're operating in. So we don't have a choice. It's going to be there. Will there be failures to the degree of BlockFi? It'll be worse. You know, you're going to have traditional financial institutions that are getting hurt here rather than the BlockFis of the world. So it's all coming. We're absolutely going to see a cycle again where, you know, we're going to see the appreciation. We're going to see the people who come late to the space. We're going to see them get hurt by, you know, over leveraging in the system. We're going to see, it won't be NFTs this time. It'll be meme coins or whatever the hell it is. But there will be, the reaching out on the risk curve and the people who get misguided, and find shit rather than, actually, finding the way that money potentially could be stored in this industry. And we're going to go through it, rinse and repeat all again. But it's when these traditional financial institutions are coming into this space, it's just, I keep stemming back to, we're getting protection they're going to help us get big. They're going to help us provide, really get sticky where they're not like the attacks are not going to be able to come in the fashion they did the last couple of years.
It's nuanced.
I want to be clear. I want to be clear. My comments on SAB 121 weren't like, I don't think this should have been passed. It was like, I'm an accelerationist. I'm like, let's speed run this shit. Get the cum rocket ETF out there. Let people speculate on it. Let all these companies blow up. The reason bringing that up is for the listener. I do think we do have the potential. Obviously, that's what Onramp's doing. It's what you're doing. Your small part at CoinKite, Rodolfo, is there is a right way to do this stuff and to educate the listeners of this. Like now that this law is passed, like this is all possible. However, we do have ways in which this could be prevented, and the market has to demand it at a certain
Can
point.
we just at least acknowledge? I feel like this is another truth that Bitcoiners refuse to acknowledge, is that Bitcoin is available to everyone, but it's not for everyone. The majority of the people are going to use Bitcoin the same way everyone in the world uses dollar, right? Like, if you are a Brazilian government, that's dollars with risk Brazil, right? Like there is no such thing as other currencies in the world. It's all dollar. Like the euro is dollar, because at the end of the day, for you to build that truck in Europe, they're like dollarizing that debt through either the external country's debt or their own debt as a company. Then buy commodities, they're all dollarized. It's dollar. That it's going to be the same with Bitcoin, right? Eventually, you're just going to have Bitcoin being the underlining of everything, regardless if you have a cold card of Bitcoin in it, right? You're just going to be more ahead if you have the underlying asset. But at the end of the day, that's the path, right? Like, and you have to accept that, like, there is only 2 quadrillion Satoshis, right? And that's not enough for everybody, because, it's not equally distributed. You're going to have 1% of the world population, which is already 100 times better than the current distribution, having the majority of the Bitcoin.
And this is where it gets messy, and the point is really well taken in the sense of both things can be true in the sense of it's good for the industry, to Mitch's point, but then to Marty's, to answer your question directly, this is foundationally why we exist and why I took the opportunity to build this, was after FTX and seeing what was coming from the existing incumbents were building centralized entities. And to NVK's point, you basically ultimately for a long time, you either had a cold card or you had Coinbase, right? And I know it sounds hyperbolic, but at the end of the day, it's Coinbase, FTX, BlockFi, Celsius, BNY Mellon, it's all centralized custody. And so if you have orders of magnitude larger carnage in the future with the existing market structure, because they will relend it and they'll do all the same things, because in my mind, nothing's changed since 2022. And it's kind of crazy that nobody talks about that we will see all of those losses, and those will be individual. There'll be a lot of people. There'll be institutions that are made up by individuals. There'll be individual losses. So while it's good for the industry, it's also bad in the sense of a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money, but it's also messy. And that's just part of this process. And so part of the education and conversations is figuring out all the different ways that you can store your asset, knowing the different counterparties, all the things that we talk about. So there's it's all right and it's all wrong in the sense, it has to play out this way. And it's just do you want to play with the way, I think of it like gravity? You either live in it, or I guess you don't. You either have to kill yourself or just go in a corner. But the point is, it all is going to go in one direction, whether we like it or not. You just have to play with it.
I think, Michael, to your point, I think the most important thing now is this: with Bitcoin, you don't need permission to own it, right? With everything else, ever, you needed permission to own it. And with gold, they come knock on the door and fucking take it too. So at least you have a thing now that a person can go and buy it, without any permission and quietly too, right? And they can travel with it. So we can enter this new messy world in a much better place as individuals, right? Like, so how can this not be better? How can this not be winning? Like, everybody has this opportunity, and at this current prices, even if you're somebody in like Africa, you can still buy a little bit of Bitcoin, right? That's not going to be true in 10 years, right? But you can still buy the underlying asset even if you're very poor. So like it's hard not to be like bullish on this.
Yeah,
and you can still buy the underlying asset of something that I keep coming back to it. Our votes are being fought over here in the U.S. and there are like you saw the dynamic this last week of when Biden got bullish and started to talk about the Ethereum ETF. What did Trump do? He accepted crypto payments to try to change the narrative and become more positive, crypto in that direction. It's going to go back and forth. These people are Marty's got guns over there.
No, the only winning move is to play. It's like
exactly. This is many years ago. Okay, 2014, I think. They were trying to get politicians to accept Bitcoin, okay, for political campaigns, because if the politicians had Bitcoin, they wouldn't make Bitcoin illegal. In those days, you could make Bitcoin illegal and kill Bitcoin. It worked. It's the same mechanism. It's like these guys have bags. Nancy is not going to make unrealized cap gains on stock because she is a big stockholder, right? Like, we want all these assholes to have the assets so they don't mess with it.
And when in the world, though, is someone in Africa or wherever they are in the world benefited from game theory that played out where they're holding an asset and then you've got potential presidents arguing over who's going to increase their value and buying power more? The dynamic is totally changed. This has never existed before, and this is the game theory.
On that note, Mitch, Logan, pull up the tweet I put in as we went live. Breaking news, not that one. Oh yeah, this one. Marathon Digital partnered with the country of Kenya to harness their underutilized energy assets to mine Bitcoin. So we have a public-private partnership between the Kenyan government and Marathon Digital, a publicly traded miner here in the U.S., to basically mine Bitcoin with their excess energy assets.
I mean, it's pretty insane, right? That you can monetize stranded energy remotely. Like, it has never been possible, right? Because you have to take that energy, right? Put it in a capacitor or put it in a line and to take it somewhere else, right? And you have a lot of loss to do that. And, now it's like, hey, oh, look, I have a hole in the ground that's not doing anything, like, but it has energy in it. You put a miner on the internet. It's like, boom, I'm making money. You can't compete with these incentives.
No.
It reminds me
you can't illegalize profit. Like, I think this is the part that people don't fucking get it. It's like, you can't make profit illegal. Like, communists have tried. They always fail. Like, people will find a way to make a profit. They want their freedom credits, right? And they will try to rope in the politicians who are all corrupt, on their cause, right? And then you can't. It's just the incentives are impossible to fight with. It's just that every single sort of like more moral, ethical way of like storing money and monetizing the money, right, have always been things that are less moral or ethically not great, or they were not extremely monetizable, right?
Yeah.
And that's why we always lost. Like, it's like, it's always been this choice. It's like, I have to be ethical or I want to make money, right? Like, and with Bitcoin, it's like, fuck you all. I'm just going to hold my Bitcoin until it appreciates, being moral in my corner, right? Like, I'm going to be sitting on my little pond flourishing, until you all fucking fight each other to death and sort it out. But number go up, and it can do number go up ethically, right? You can't fight these fucking incentives.
Yeah, I mean, that's a key thing that Marty's been talking about. He brought up the other week about what's more important. It's like the banks or the energy sector. And he made the case, and I think it's the energy sector, because once you have the energy, that's what powers the world, and you tie it to Bitcoin. And it reminds me of this quote, because everybody talks about the UAE and what's happening in Dubai. And they say, like, UAE is like a speedboat. Like, you can move and it shifts fast. And Saudi Arabia is like a battleship, and it takes a while to churn, but when it churns, it can like take over the world. And this notion of like when they start to grok, and they're starting to get there, and they start mining Bitcoin and leveraging a lot of the excess energy and a lot of the renewable stuff that they're powering over the next decade, like those incentives from a geopolitical jurisdictional perspective just completely wipe out a lot of this like conversation around, oh, where am I going to live? Who's going to be fair? It's like everybody wants your Bitcoin, and they're going to make it known, and you're going to have a lot of places to go in the future.
I mean, and if you have your shitcoin mining, they're all going to have to move to proof of stake, because the AI companies are going to pay more for computation on the GPUs than they will, right? So they're all going to move to proof of stake. So they're all fully capturable, right? Bitcoin, you know, you already have all the tendencies of money to become monopolies. So like Bitcoin has that going for it. It already has the Lindy, right? It has the computation. So nobody's going to like come for the king that way. You know, it's again, extremely bullish.
Well, and to add to that, so this is something you're really passionate about. I know Marty is like this whole idea of Nostr and all the open internet is like starting to think about, you have price, and then so utility of the assets better, right, on an open network standard, but then you have price. And those are going to converge where the person wants Bitcoin, so they naturally are going to adopt it. As the price appreciates, they're going to just opt in for these other avenues that aren't, you know, Twitter, or aren't these other like open standards. And so these things are both like combining together, and it's not one or the other that comes to the market. They literally just like grow together at the same time.
You know, like contrary again to, you know, what the feel good people think, it's like, it's not like, you know, Bitcoin documentaries or, you know, freedom loving stories that get people to adopt the technology. It's number go up. You know, number go up is the best marketing that Bitcoin has.
Don't tell Rockstar that. He just put a good documentary out, you know.
It's a great documentary. It feels great. For us, I love it, right? But I am not the 99% of the people that do not give a flying fuck about this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And what's cool is that, like, you know, number go up is going to get them.
Yeah. And what's going to do that? It's giving the ability for financial institutions, for Apple to go buy Bitcoin. That's going to make number go up. U.S. government saying we're not going to go dump the, you know, the Bitcoin that, you know, we've seized. We're going to hold on to it as a strategic treasury reserve. That's what makes number go up. And everything I'm seeing over the last couple of weeks, it's starting to move us in that direction.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the U.S. government's going to dump the coins and then buy the ETF, but that's a different story.
Well, it's like the meme with the guy behind the guy or whatever. It's like the U.S. government is the ETF.
They can't help themselves. The government is too incompetent.
I disagree. I have some of like the. I do think we have. Was that?
Disagree with what?
That they would dump it and buy the ETF. I do think from a national security standpoint, you know, the red software, it's on the shelf behind me. I do think we have friends in you know, in the government that understand some of the national security concerns of maybe keeping not holding on to that Bitcoin. And I do think there's a little bit of infighting right now between you know, between different branches to potentially hold on to some of that.
But the problem is the mandate. No, it's even legally the mandate of all this government entities that acquire the Bitcoin from people forcefully. they have to sell. It's not a choice. They have to forgo the asset. And then what happens is it's other entities of government that are involved in other things that buy the asset. They can't just transfer from one branch to another. It's you know, it's government incompetence. Like, you know,
it's funny we talk about this. Like, I think of Coinbase and whatever Bitcoin they hold as the government. Like, I don't think there's any difference in like, if Coinbase and the ETF is holding the Bitcoin, then it's the government. And whether that line is tomorrow or 3 years or 5 years, there's a certain point Like
I mean, Condoleezza is a board member at Coinbase, right? It
Really?
doesn't get more deep state than that, yeah, or at least was.
Interesting.
Yeah, man, those guys are not playing to lose. They're incompetent as fuck, but they're not playing to lose.
Yeah. I mean, you see this with their partnership with the IRS, the partnership with the hacking team back in the day, their partnership with USDC. They're trying to be the compliant, government-friendly.
I mean, their partnership with Tether, right? I mean, they told Tether, okay, you guys cannot have anything else that's not treasuries. Tether becomes the 16th biggest purchaser of U.S. treasuries on the planet. Let's just say that they have full freedom, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they don't get talked about enough. Like, you can't move that amount of money through a banking system without having certain relationships. It doesn't.
No, I mean, helicopters show up. Helicopters show up. Those Apaches and Chinooks show up for a lot less than that.
It's true.
But we need companies like this doing it. Like, they pave the way so that, like, the builders in our, like, you need the Coinbases, you need the Tethers to go cozy up, because that allows the framework for companies like Onramp to come into the space and go do this better.
Well,
it's the framework, right? Like, the Bitcoiners need to shed this framework of like thinking that we have some agency of what people are going to do or not do. It's like, we don't allow or disallow Coinbase to exist. Like, fuck Brian, right? Like, I mean, those guys are horrible human beings in that entity, and they hate Bitcoin. But like, it's not in our control, like, in this free market that we're building, to like have any agencies to like, they can exist or they can't exist, right? People normally argue about these things as if we have any agency. We don't, right? I mean, the incentives are such that they exist.
It is funny, though, on Twitter, people thinking that they have agency of these sort of things, but they grab the popcorn and watch. That's all you can do.
And I think
when Coinbase started, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think they conflate the agency of them versus the agency of themselves, because we're saying both the same thing. It's like, the market's going to do what the market does. You don't have to participate in it, and you shouldn't, because you're probably going to get rugged. Is the point.
This leads to a good last topic too. Is like, while all this is going on, and NVK won't put words in your mouth, but I think we're aligned in the sense that we think a lot of the regulatory, quote unquote, regulatory clarity and Wall Street getting introduced provides cover for people building out cypherpunk tools, like whether that's on chain via the Lightning Network. Now these Chaumian mints, combining all of this with Nostr. Like, we could look up a decade from now, and while everybody's focused on institutionalized white glove Bitcoin, you have this movement of open source developers building out sci-fi tech that is fundamentally better from a user experience point of view, that enables people to actually like use Bitcoin in a truly sovereign and as a medium of exchange over these protocols.
Yeah, I mean, money is not very good. Even the best money is not good if you can't coordinate commerce, right? And the comms are all compromised and censored, right? So if you can't have clear means of coordinating that commerce and price discovery, then money could die. And so, like, we can't depend on Twitter. We can't depend on anything that's centralized, right? Like, we've learned that with money, that you cannot depend on a database to have a fair monetary system. So Bitcoin exists, and exists outside of this centralized sort of like dynamics. And, for a long time, we didn't have a solution to go around like Twitter and to go around email and things that are sort of like very, very centralized or have centralizing tendencies. And Nostr resolves a lot of this problems, and I think the two combined like give us like, a superpower, right? Like, you can now coordinate, price discover, and exchange, right? And I mean, you don't need anything else to build civilization, right? The rest is just people being people and sorting shit out.
Yeah.
What can you break down this is something I'm working through, is like the idea, the ecash is one component, but the dollar peg, and this idea of the guys working on it, like one of the angles from the use case is just because people aren't used to seeing sats and the numbers and decimals. So this natural way to receive the dollar, kind of obfuscate what's happening in the background. And then if you want to get out of it, you know, obviously need the edges to get back into fiat. But like, where do you see the use case there? If there is a use case, because I know this stuff just like started to get, you know, more popular the past few weeks, but curious like how you guys are thinking about it.
I think there's like two parts to this. One is we have the unit bias problem, right? But don't worry, when SAT dollar happens in the next few years, that resolves that problem. The issue is like, you know, the best shitcoin in the planet is the US dollar, right? Like what people want is not Ethereum, Solana, or any of the shit, or even Bitcoin. What they want is dollars. But they want freedom dollars, right? And if you are in pretty much any country on the planet, there is no freedom dollars unless you use cash. And even then, you know, you're losing if you try to store it. But people for commerce, they need stability, right? You need to know that your contract that you signed today has similar economical purchasing power in 6 months, right? Otherwise, like if you ever dealt with currencies that are very volatile, it's a fucking nightmare. Right? I mean, Canadian dollar lost like, I don't know, 30% in the last few years, right? It's very unpleasant to do business in USD denominated debt if you're doing a Canadian underlining transaction, right? So, you know, for business to operate, business needs to be concerned with that contract being similar in 6 months so that they can close that trade. Now, you can't do that with Bitcoin, right? I mean, like it's very difficult to price out 6 months in Bitcoin for you to do that contract. So what do people do is they use Tether, right? Because Tether is freedom dollars. I mean, at least kind of. I mean, they block a lot of people, but a lot of people get through, right? And so think about Tether as the old school Swiss bank account, right? It's like, you know, it was franc denominated. Really, you could have US denominated at a time. But the point is you have a stable coin. That's what US dollar is. And the demand is high for that. But people need freedom, which the dollar doesn't offer anymore. So what you need is, how can it denominate in USD, but still have an underlying freedom asset, right? And people are trying to do that with Bitcoin. It's complicated, it's tricky, you can get very fucked because the price moves so much. So, you know, creating those hedges is tricky. But the point is, you can now create a stable coin based on Bitcoin. It's as risky as it is, but the people using those freedom dollars on ecash that are backed by Bitcoin, they don't need that money for a long time, and their alternatives available to them are horrible, right? What's the alternative to that for an Argentinian person, an Argentinian peso? Good luck with that, right? Or somebody in Africa somewhere, like good luck to that using their local currency. You don't want that shit. So the demand for stable dollars backed by something they have access to have those stable dollars is only going to grow. And ecash is absolutely perfect for that. ecash is free banking, right? And we all know that free banking, you know, like it or don't like it, is a very natural demand sort of like a service, right? Like there's very natural demand for that because people need credit, or you need credit to create stability on some hedge, right? And I think ecash is going to fill that niche very well because it can always be cleared between the mints on Bitcoin, that be Lightning or on chain. So sort of like, sorry for the roundaboutness, but it's kind of important that like we recognize why the stable dollar is important and why the underlying thing that holds that dollar is important.
No, that's helpful context. I mean, it's why I've thought for a very long time, and I don't know if this will be controversial take or not, but a lot of these ecash mints look a lot like Onramp in return, because the reality is, whether it's the consumer wanting to know who's running it and the like idea of exit scamming, all these things become a lot less likely when you have not only a single custodian that can't unilaterally move and rug you, but they also have laws and regulations and balance sheets that protect it. And then as it starts to play around with this like dollar denomination, as you know, when it's 10 million, 100 million, maybe nobody cares, but you're talking $5-10 billion. Now people start to care, and you have to be able to, you know, navigate the accounting, legal, and tax perspectives from it. So yeah.
Have you heard of this term called million mints? So when you move the trust to the edges, right, that's what ecash does. And if you have a million mints, each holding $5, which state actor is going to go after a dude holding $5?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's sure there's going to be selective enforcement, whatever, right? Like, it's not pretty, it's messy, but reality is you can't shut down a million mints, each holding $5. Like, good luck.
And that's the idea behind this as well, is when you think about ETFs and financial service partners, as we work with banks and other things step in, they just hold one of the keys in a quorum for their own partners, and they can't rug themselves. And they also can't be rugged because they don't have unilateral control. And you just spread that game theory. Two parts of Rodolfo, he doesn't know his involvement in this business. When we first were bringing this out, I showed him it in his mind. You know, most people looked at multi-institution like, what is this? He's like, oh, of course. Like, this makes complete sense. And the other one was, I think it was in Utah at a beefsteak I brought up. We were talking about, I think you and your wife referenced the last trade as like, this is just the last trade. And obviously this is the name of the show. It was a mutual, I think you may have said it first, or we were both talking about it, but the idea wasn't solely mine. And I don't think anybody knows that yet. So you're very foundational even in this show and the last trade.
I appreciate it. I mean, it really is, right? I mean, once you buy Bitcoin, you don't like, you might have to spend some Bitcoin to do things. But like, nobody sells Bitcoin to hold fear.
There's nothing else.
or to buy gold, or to buy stock. Can you imagine like who's selling Bitcoin out there to go buy some NVIDIA? Like, nobody's doing that. They might just like have new cash flow that they're allocating some to NVIDIA, but nobody's selling Bitcoin to buy NVIDIA.
I think you're wrong. I think it is happening, unfortunately. But I don't think we're. I think it's our job.
I think he just doxed himself.
Yeah, I don't want to. So
I think
this
those
is actually
this podcast.
No.
Yeah,
now we're gonna have to. Wait. So two parts. We're gonna kind of quasi rug. I don't want to. There are a lot of people short Bitcoin that we thought held, or talk about having Bitcoin.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone's a LARPer.
Yeah, so if anybody's on Twitter, you look at these large exchanges and you think people there holding Bitcoin, they like might have zero Bitcoin. And that's all I'll say about that. So maybe he did dox himself in his NVIDIA position. You heard it here.
No,
Mitch is
I wish I had
NVIDIA Max position.
Mitch is an NVIDIA Max. We're going to spread that rumor.
So number one, I think you think about like the ETF flows. Like, those people are 100% selling Bitcoin to go into something else for, whether it's rebalancing or.
Oh yeah, but that's not Bitcoin.
That's not Bitcoin. Number two, like messages with friends that we've dragged into Bitcoin that don't totally understand it yet. Focused on, maybe they're up 10% and they get out and go buy something else. They don't get it yet. The last trade happens not when you first buy Bitcoin. It's when you actually understand it's the last trade. So I think there's...
Let me put it to you this way.
Yeah.
I think, I don't want to sound like goal posting, but I guess I should have qualified that comment a little. Think about it this way. I don't think a single person like who has Bitcoin in a hardware wallet, right, that they took self-custody, is moving that Bitcoin back to an exchange to buy NVIDIA.
Totally agree. Totally agree with you there.
And that's what I would consider a Bitcoiner. The rest is just in for the ride, right? But I'm talking about the people who actually took self-custody of it, right? Like, I can't imagine that flow. I seriously cannot imagine a person doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's still early.
They had their earning calls today, right? Mitch, what's how good did NVIDIA do?
They crushed it. No, I think it was up like 10% yesterday. But
people are saying,
what
do we think? Are they in the next Enron? I've seen people saying they're going to be the next Enron.
That's real. It's real. Like, the amount of fucking silicon those guys are selling, it's absolutely lunacy. Like, you can't do AI without that. It's like somebody just discovered oil, right? and like whatever thing you need to do oil, say steel, right? Like it's like they're the only people who have the best steel. Like think about it that way. Like you can't exist with this new tech without them for now.
This was an amazing pod, and it's very different than our regular pods NVK. So you should just know that I think some of the listeners are going to appreciate it, and some are going to be like, "Wow, that was that had some range from the last trade." But the reality is, there's a lot of pragmatism and like first principles thinking that go into this. Minus, a little bit of the shit coins and the cursing. It's okay, but appreciate.
You can beep all my curses. Beep all my curses, so you guys can keep it. Nobody told me it had to be
no, it's better when it's authentic. So that Marty knows
beep
this.
it. It's all good. Beep it.
We're not gonna. Logan's sitting there shaking his head like I'm not spending time to go through and beep all this.
There's a lot of beeps.
So I guess what would be the parting note for anybody that you think is listening to this podcast? Institutional investors, they're trying to navigate the space. How should they be approaching this?
I think that, like it's very difficult for a person in an institution to be the person who sticks the neck out, because you lose your neck if the price drops. But the truth, the uncomfortable truth is, like, you have no choice. You're going to be buying Bitcoin. So better buy early at cheaper than buy later expensive. And you know what? If you lose your job, it might be a great thing too, because you buy some Bitcoin and you might be in a much better place later. You drown your firing pension package into BTC and move on. There is no avoiding it. Your company depends on it. Like you can't. It's like saying you have treasury strategy and you don't have S&P 500 on it. Like you would sound like an insane person. It's no different. And it sounds all insane now. It's all very comfortable for me and these other three crazy people here to talk about the stuff with so much certainty. But you either take the leap of faith and be ahead, or just be dragged later.
Yeah. Anybody's listening is unaware of NVK, CoinKite, what he's built. We just sat down with an OG for an hour and a half. You're getting high octane alpha, a builder in the space too. I mean, you are a rare breed of somebody who's been building in the space for over a decade. Most people don't last that long.
We're having too much fun.
It is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Michael, Mitch, anything you guys want to end with?
No, thanks for joining. And like NVK said, you can't find economic reality, so you better figure out what your strategy is.
Get as much Bitcoin as possible. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. If you found the information valuable, please share the episode with a friend or leave a rating on your favorite podcast app. All the links we discussed in today's show will be in the show notes inside your podcast app. Before we finish, a quick reminder that Onramp Media is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment or legal advice. Regardless of where you are on your Bitcoin journey, we'd love to hear from you. Visit onrampbitcoin.com/contact to schedule a consultation with one of our private client advisors.